Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Simon, a second year medical student at the University of Zambia, and in this video I'm going to talk about part 1 of how to practically use active recall and spaced repetition. Now, active recall and spaced repetition are study techniques which I talked about in one of my previous videos, which I recommend you should check out if you haven't. So I decided to make 2 videos in parts because I want to explain it as fundamentally as I can, and I also want to give practical ways of how you can implement it. I want to give as many practical ways as possible depending on the kind of resources that you have, so that this can cater for a lot of people. If you have a computer, if you don't have, if you have a smartphone. So I want to cater in a lot of ways on how you can use active recall and spaced repetition. Hence I've decided that I should make this. So for those who are hearing about active recall and spaced repetition for the first time, active recall is simply a study technique which involves actively retrieving information from your memory, unlike just rereading the same information, which make you fall into the trap of recognition. And spaced repetition is simply actively recalling that information on spaced intervals. So these two techniques work really well together, such that it was very necessary that I try to explain them together. But this video is going to deal much with active recall. Part 2 is going to deal much with spaced repetition. So so you should be waiting for part 2 and make sure that you watch them both so that you can get the full information. Okay, so one of the practical ways you can use for active recall is using structured questions. Now, structured questions, I didn't have a specific term to use, but for the sake of communication, I just named them structured questions. So structured questions are going to encompass questions which have been made for you, like questions from a textbook, questions from a past paper, questions from the examples you did in class. So all those. Now the thing is, these end of chapter questions and questions from your homeworks, assignments, tutorial sheets, depending on the kind of institution that you are at and depending on the level, because if you're at secondary school, it's rare that you get tutorial sheets, if at all. At the university, you probably get a lot of tutorial sheets and assignments, so you can use all those. So it is basically the same thing. So what you do is you get these questions and try to answer them from memory. Do not really worry about how many questions you manage to answer, because it is that difficulty of trying to answer the questions that really supercharges this technique. Now, one thing which I have to mention is active recall is not the same as memorization. So what I mean by memorization is simply memorizing something without really understanding it. So active recall is mainly used in the application and the recall stage of your effective learning. So if you're learning new content, of course active recall can be used even in the learning of new content, though in to a little extent. But when learning new content, I advise that you first use techniques like the Feynman technique, which I talked about in a video where I talked about my 3 most effective study techniques, which I think again you should go back and watch so that you can understand these things really, really well. So it's that different. So you have to understand your information first before you can try to actively recall it, unlike memorization, which is basically a waste of time. Now, past papers, they are in that category of structured questions, but they're a bit different in the sense that mostly past papers are going to reflect the kind of exams that you have. So specifically for your exams, past papers are an ideal source of structured questions, and you can use past papers for active recall in so many ways. One of them is using them on a topical level, as in for a specific topic that you're studying, you go into past paper to search for those questions on that topic, which you can solve and try to find answers either from your teachers or tutors or even with your friends in discussions. And the other one is solving past papers as a whole. Now, I want to talk about solving past papers as a whole. I talked about this in my video, which was talking about how to fail smartly. Learning how to fail smartly. I want to emphasize this concept again, knowing how much it has done for me. I started using this technique not only in university, I used it in my secondary school as well, only that I didn't even know that I was employing active recall because I didn't even know what that was. I only learned that after I had already finished my secondary school. But I downloaded a lot of past papers, Cambridge past papers, because I was doing pure sciences, and a lot of Cambridge past papers with the same subject codes, so they had the same structure basically. So I solved a couple of past papers for biology and chemistry and additional mathematics. I used to solve them as a whole, and mostly you could find that I would solve past papers. Paper 1 had, I think, 40 questions. At first I could maybe just get something like 30 out of 40, 32, and as I continued I started hitting good numbers like 38 out of 40, sometimes 39, sometimes 36. So it was in those ranges, and I made a lot of questions from those past papers, Cambridge past papers, in the ECZ, the one that we use here in Zambia. So it is good to solve whole past papers in a set period of time, more like an exam. You continue testing yourself like an exam. So this is a way of active recall, and when you don't find the answers, you simply go back to your notes, review them, and you get a better understanding of those concepts. Now the second practical ways of using active recall is the use of flashcards. Now flashcards can either be digital or they can be the same physical traditional ones, the paper ones. So in my secondary school I never used flashcards a lot, but I remember I made some flashcards when we were doing genetics in biology in grade 12, because I couldn't differentiate most of the definitions, homozygous, heterozygous, homologous, I don't know. So all those were really confusing me, so I made a couple of flashcards on those so that I could learn the differences and I could remember their definitions. But I never used them very much in secondary school. But in secondary school in first year of university, they were one of the biggest study tools that I used. So I used a computer software called Anki. So for those who are interested in Anki, you can simply download that software. It works both on mobile or computer, only that on a computer it is much faster to make flashcards. But the good part about this one is you can also download flashcards from other people who have made them. You can download them and then you can use them for study. Now I like the ones I make myself, because it really ensures that I only focus on those concepts which I think are relevant and the concepts which I think flashcards are necessary for. Now the way flashcards are a bit different from structured questions, in the sense that flashcards are going to deal mostly with factual kind of concepts, those which are facts which you just have to know. So according to course and course, the flashcards are going to be little. Like for example, me, I had a lot of flashcards in biology and very few flashcards in physics, because physics was it didn't have a lot of facts, as in facts that you have to remember. It had concepts, and it is not very efficient to use flashcards to remember concepts. So you can even use other types of apps and softwares for flashcards. There is Quizlet, and there are so many more apps and softwares that you can use for flashcards. Now I love Anki because it also incorporates the concept of spaced repetition. It's like an inbuilt system, so it uses both active recall and spaced repetition at the same time. And in part 2 of this video, I'm going to share my computer screen so that I can show you exactly how Anki works. But for those guys who are really interested in it, you can simply Google on how you can use Anki software if you have a computer, that is. Even if you have a smartphone, you can try it, although I've never tried to use it on a smartphone, so I'm not really sure how well it works on a smartphone. I've only used it on my computer so far, and it was an absolute game changer. Okay, so the other practical ways of using active recall is self-made questions. Now on this one, it doesn't have a lot of scientific backing behind it, because there are different opinions about it, I could say. Some people say it is good to make your own questions, some people say it is not, but I tried it myself and I found it really helpful. Now I like writing my own questions because I structure my questions in a way that I decide what really I have to remember. So the way it is this is different from flashcards, because even flashcards, I make my own flashcards on Anki software. But the way this one is let's say, for example, we are talking about DNA replication. Yeah, so in a flashcard, because flashcards have to be very brief and they have to look for factual questions, it will be something you create a flashcard which is like, okay, which enzyme is involved in the unzipping of the DNA molecule? Yeah, so the answer will be just one, helicase. That's it. That's a flashcard. But the way I used to structure my questions, I used to write my own questions to be like, okay, explain what happens in the first stage or in the unzipping of DNA during DNA replication, and also mention the enzymes that are involved. So I expand that question in the sense that I'm going to have to recollect a lot of information for me to answer that question, because I was basically transcribing my notes, creating questions from those notes. So that is how I used to do it. But now I used to use I used to write the notes. I used to type them, because I can at least type reasonably on a fast speed. So I used to type them in Excel, and I used to use a color coding system for spaced repetition, which I'm going to talk about in part 2 of this video, because I don't want this video to be very long. But whether you have a computer or not, this technique, I recommend that you use it, because you are going to write them simply in your books. So the time that you use to write notes, you can simply use it to write questions. Yeah, so those questions, because you already have the notes, you have the soft copy notes. Yeah, now this advice I'm giving it mainly to those people who are in university, because it wouldn't be the same for secondary school going pupils, because mostly for you guys, you don't have a lot of textbooks. Some don't have textbooks to read from, and your teachers are going to make it a bit mandatory to write notes. So that's a bit of a different case. But for guys in university, where you have an abundant supply of notes, a couple of textbooks, writing notes, it could be something good for you. But this is something that I did on my observation, which you can try out and see if it is going to work well for you as well. Okay, so another practical way of using active recall is doing it in groups. Now active recall is one of the techniques that you have to be employing as a group. So what I mean by this is you go with questions to a group, and you try to answer those questions as a group from memory first. Yeah, so you're going to get more validation about the things you're talking about, depending on also the opinions of other people and the explanations that they bring to the table. Yeah, so in the same groups, the other thing that you can do is give each other work, and give yourself a limited amount of time, try to solve them, and then compare your answers. I actually did this with a couple of friends for my first year, and it proved to be a very important and a very effective technique, where we actually used to solve past papers, but we could be together, we could be there, put the past paper there, and then we could give ourselves a specific amount of time, set a timer, we would solve the questions, and after that we would compare our answers, try to attack it from different point of views, because people think differently, and it is important to hear how other people think about certain questions. And if we don't find the answer, we would now go into the notes and check even on the internet to check for the answers. Now that was the other way that you can supercharge your group discussions using active recall, so that it is really effective and it is going to benefit all the members, because this is going to ensure that all the members are going to actively contribute to the discussions of the group. Alright guys, that's it for today. Wait for part 2 of this topic. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share if you found it really helpful, or if you just want to hang out with me. So see you next time.